Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this live event. And a great pleasure today to have Daylian Cain from Yale with us. And I will ask Daylian to introduce himself in a moment. But first, the welcome to the participants, also the welcome to the ones that will be watching the live event afterwards as a recorded event. And we know that with Daylian being in the US and it's pretty early in some of the US regions, especially for sure in the West Coast. So we may have a number of people watching only the event later on. And a warm welcome to you all. I just came back actually from the West Coast yesterday. So, if you feel that my energy level is not full, it's because of the 9 hours of difference. So I was still sleeping in San Francisco at the same time. Now, here we are. Let's try to find out a bit more about our audience. So before we tell us a bit more about ourselves, why don't you tell us either something about where you're based now, where are you connecting from, or maybe, if you have any specific expectation, the art of discovery in sales and negotiation is the topic of today. So, do drop us a quick message. On the right side of the screen, you have a chat function, and you will be able to communicate, to ask questions, because that's your life event, right? We want you to be satisfied and get the answer that you want. I do have a number of questions from Daylian. I'm sure that will be very much a debate. I will also be adding my own perspective, but you may also have your own questions. So do take the opportunity to leverage this event. And in the meantime, why don't we discover a bit more about Daylian Cain? Daylian.
I'm from Nova Scotia, Canada. I've been teaching full-time at Yale since 2007. I teach negotiations, leadership, basically anything to do with decision-making. I like to say that I study why smart people do dumb things. And there's lots of work to be done there. And I would say negotiations is my favorite topic to teach. Thanks for having me.
Okay, fantastic. Perfect. Hello, and so great. You have also Christina from the US, and we have Paris, we have Milan, we have Rome, and I'm sure we will have a number of other people joining us from different parts of the country. So fantastic. So let's get started. And if I may, Daylian, by the way, sorry, I didn't say something about myself, but my name is Giuseppe, Giuseppe Conti. I'm also teaching, but I'm a former procurement guy, so I came into the academic world in the later part of my career, and spent a good part of my career in sales and procurement negotiations. So that's where my background is.
You won a big award this year. Congratulations.
Yeah, I won the award for the #1 guru in negotiation. So
it's awesome. Yeah, you have a big following. It's great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. And I'll be coming for the award to the US in Orlando, California, in Orlando, Florida in September. So
Sweet.
Yeah, fantastic. Now let me start, Daylian, with the question, and I'll start with the question that I get asked more often by salespeople, because in negotiation between sales and procurement, often salespeople struggle to get procurement people to open up. Do you have some advice on how to deal with a counterpart that is reluctant to share?
Yeah, a couple of things. I'll say three things here. First of all, well, let me give you some context. When I teach negotiations and sales, it's a lot about asking questions, figuring people out. I often say negotiations is learning, borrowing that from Deepak Malhotra at HBS. I say it's learning and problem solving. I think he would agree. That said, I probably have too many questions, right? People don't like the Spanish Inquisition. And so you want to divide the questions up into kind of easy, get to know you questions and kind of the hard hitting questions. And so that all is to say that number one, keep it light in the beginning. You know, even though, for example, money might be the most important issue, it's also a win lose issue, it's a contentious issue. So I wouldn't lead with that. Even if money is the most important thing, that doesn't mean that you should start with it. So keep it light in the beginning and be thoughtful about dividing up your questions into the easy and tough. Number two, I would say reciprocity. What I mean is, and I think you should signal this, anything I ask you, you can ask me. And if I ever see that you get uncomfortable by my questions, I might jump in and say, "Sorry, I don't mean to make you uncomfortable. Here's how I would answer that." Like, "Why are you selling this pizza store, Giuseppe?" "Oh, well, none of your business." Or more likely, he might say, "Personal reasons." "Well, here's why I'm here. Here's why I want to buy your business." And so you kind of lead with example. So number one was keep it light. Number two, reciprocity, and tell them that you're going to be reciprocal with your questions. Number three is a little more complicated. I'll give some examples. It's giving example answers to your questions with the goal of justifying your questions and letting them know, especially, that you mean these as easy, elegant trade, win-win type of questions rather than I want to get leverage on you, let's win, lose, I want to win type questions. In other words, for example, if I'm asking you why are you selling your business, and you don't think it's my business to know this, I have to justify my question. I might say, well, it's your business. You can sell to whoever you want, no questions asked, but it's literally about to become my business. And for example, I just want to make sure that your reasons for selling aren't contrary to my reasons for buying. In particular, for example, you're not going across the street to compete against me, are you? You're willing to sign a non compete, and hopefully you'll say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and it's not nothing like that. But what I'm doing with that question, in addition to getting ruling out competition, is I want you to feel more comfortable with what is my goal here and are my questions justified? In the spirit of giving examples, let me give one more quick one. When I was negotiating with the dean at Yale, I was about to sign the contract, and I said, what else should I have asked for? And he didn't like that question. He's like, "Daylian, I know you teach negotiations, but sign, darn it, sign." And I realized I didn't pose the question properly. I said, for example, I don't mean like parking. I don't mean I need a special parking space or your parking space. I just mean, for example, where do I sign up for parking? I said, "Look, I teach negotiations, but I've never negotiated a professor contract, and you do more contracts each week for professors than I will ever do in my life. So I just don't even know what's the low-hanging fruit. What I'm looking for is something valuable to me, but easy for you, and I'm willing to do some extra teaching so that it's a win-win." In other words, something like parking. Just point me to the place where I should sign up. And what he said was, "Well, parking's not an issue, just park on the street." But then he felt more comfortable saying, "Well, there are a few things that you should think about." And he gave me a lot of great advice. So, keeping it light in the beginning, keeping it reciprocal, and having example answers to your own questions ready to not only justify your questions, but position them as a little more friendly and a little less win-lose. Something like that.
Fantastic. And by the way, I was talking about, this question being asked by salespeople, but when it comes to training workshop, what's a sales executive looking to learn these days, from you?
Well, a lot of the workshops I lean on are about how to make an elegant trade, things that are valuable to one side but cheap to the other. And the the things I teach sales executives, the things that most executives are worried about are two things. First, their salespeople are throwing bad deals over the fence just to hit their numbers. We talk about that a little bit, and adjusting incentives and compensation to help salespeople think long term. But the main thing in my workshops we talk about is, well, you know, sure, price is a lever that will get many deals done. Like, you can just add a discount and that will move a lot of product, but that cuts directly into your margin. And so I'm not saying that you don't have to get price right. What I'm saying is, how do I train your salespeople so that price discounts are the last thing they reach for? And so we're constantly trying to look for buttons that move the client. Like, what do they want? Why? What are their motivators? Every salesperson knows this. But what I'm there to teach is, what of the buttons that move your client, what are the subset of buttons that you are in a good position to press? What I mean is valuable to the client, but relatively cheap or efficient for the organization, especially compared to other competitors. In other words, what value can you provide better than your competition? And so that's what I'm getting salespeople to think a little bit more strategic. For example, if you make it about price, you better be the low cost provider, and you're giving away all your margins just to get the deal done. So we try to get them to think more strategically, more creatively, and pull the discount button as a last resort.
By the way, interesting enough, this morning I was running a workshop for a sales team, and the sales vice president gave me as a brief, my people, just negotiate price. So, can you please help me, to make them think about, different elements of value that they can use in the negotiation? Because of course, if we just negotiate on price, then we are in trouble. So
Right.
it looks that, we are on the same page on this one. Now, listen, I want to go back to the topic of questions, right? Because salespeople, by the way, I want to remind also the audience, right, that this is your event and that you can ask all the questions that you want. So if you do have a question, please use the chat bot and we will address them. But going back to the topic of question and sales, right? Salespeople use a number of questioning methodology, such as the spin model that they use, to understand their buyer. Which is your favorite methodology and why?
Yeah, I like the spin model. It's interesting. The gap method. I like all the frameworks. I find them interesting, the pros and cons of each. I love reading about all of them, frankly. For me, when I'm teaching negotiations, I think I want to find out, and I teach my students to find out four things. And the fourth is almost, it's hard to find out, but that's the goal. But here are the four things. What do you want? Why? In what order? I'll explain that in a second. And at what price? The first three things, what do you want, why, and what order, is what I make the conversation about. I'd love to know your budget, but that's too tough of a question to ask. So I try to ask and share the first three things. What do we want, why, in what order? The first two are clear. I don't need to explain them to this audience. But the third one, I think most people need to spend more time on. In what order? Here's what I mean. We're negotiating six things. What is your top three? What is your bottom three? They can't all be priorities. Then you'd have no priorities. So what are your top two, middle two, bottom two priorities? And so, for example, if you and I are co-locating our headquarters, before we fight about whether it should be in Milan or Montreal, I want to know how big of an issue location is for you. Obviously, it's a big issue, but is it top two, middle two, or bottom two? I won't ask you the price you're putting on it. I'd love to know, but you're not going to tell me that. You're not going to tell me it's worth 250,000, because then I'll give you 251,000. So we'll kind of keep our numbers secret, but we'll share our interests and priorities. Now, why do I make such a big deal about figuring out the ordering? Because again, I'm looking to make elegant trades, things that are valuable to you, cheap to me. So one of the hints that I'll find such a way is, if it's top two for you and bottom two for me, if city is top two for you, maybe we should talk about your city first. I want to go to Montreal, but you want me in Milan? Give me an offer. I'll consider it. And so we're trying to make these elegant trades. So what do you want? Why? in what order. And I think that also that's how you have to prepare. Everyone knows what they want and why, but very few people, when I put them in workshops, have been thoughtful about the priorities, like the ordering of the priorities. They know they want this and that, but they haven't thought about which they want more if they can't have it all. So I force them to make kind of some tough choices before they negotiate. Yep.
Mhm. And by the way, building on this topic of understanding the priorities, another thing which I like to do is encourage people to use comparative question, right?
Mm.
Do you prefer this or that? So, because of course, if you ask people, but location is important, yes, important. But payment terms are important, yes, payment terms is important. But volume is important, then, you never get. So, with the comparative question is another way to get more insight into the order of priorities for the other party, right? When you get them to choose between one and the other.
I love it. And you might say, "Do you want this or that?" And they'll say, "You have to do better than that, Cain. You're lowballing me here." And I say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. But where should we start the conversation? Which do you hate the least, this or that? I know I have to improve." Let me just give you a quick example of an elegant trade that will give you a sense of why priorities and ordering is so important. I was in the Middle East recently, and during one of the breaks, I was the poorest person in the room by a lot. Two people came up and they just wanted some advice on a merger they were doing. And at first I thought, how can I give advice in 60 seconds? I'll have to book a call with them. But here was their problem. I won't name the companies, but a very, very large company and a small startup worth 10 million. The other company was hundreds of billions. And they were negotiating over risk. Who should take the risk? Neither one wanted to take the risk. Risk is bad. And so they fought over this for weeks and weeks. But they asked my opinion. What did I think of their final solution, which was 50-50 risk sharing? And I didn't like it. I thought, like, at first glance, doesn't somebody hate risk more than the other? In other words, if the big company can take more risk easily, they can handle risk, they should take all the risk, or at least the maximum risk, and be rewarded by the small company. But in fact, it was regulatory risk. What I mean is, if you run afoul of this risk, you are out of business, you go bankrupt. Now I realize, no, nobody wants that kind of risk. But a multi-billion-dollar company really, really hates that kind of risk. So the small company should take on all of the regulatory risk. And if you're worth $10 million, here's $30 million cash. Take on all my regulatory risk. In fact, just to prove the point, I was joking, kind of. I said, I'll start a shell company. Cain Consulting will take all the risk. Pay me $30 million. In other words, nobody likes risk, but we shouldn't share the risk equally. We should share it efficiently. Somebody hates the risk more, or somebody likes city more. Let them win, and then the loser should be compensated so that they're happy to lose. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. By the way, allow me to say one thing to our audience that Daylian is part of our program High Performance Negotiation and Influencing. So it's a program that where we have a leading worldwide expert like Daylian every month, and we'll put the link on the chat. You want to check it out. And for instance, we have Gina from Harvard coming in June, and every month you're gonna have a leading expert on the topic. And if you want to learn some more from Daylian, it's going to be the 15th of September. So just in case, but check out the program, and maybe you decide to join us and continue the learning journey, because of course in half an hour we are not going to be able to cover everything that we want to do. And then of course when you join the workshop, it's a workshop, so a small group is interactive, and you're going to end up also doing role play that will give you the opportunity to practice those things. Fantastic. Now let's continue with the question. And how do you use question to get someone to do what you want, but in their own interest.
This is, I win the Nobel Prize if I can answer this one, right? If you could, like, for example, if Giuseppe asked me, Daylian, don't you want to go to the gym today? Don't you want to get healthy? I don't know if I would be inspired or insulted, right? And so getting me to do what I should do is easier said than done. But I think what salespeople get wrong about this is they ask leading questions and they come off as insincere and annoying. For example, let's say you're selling a car. I'll make it up. This is more of a metaphor rather than car sales advice. But imagine you were selling Volvos. Don't ask your clients, hey, do you have kids? Do you care about their safety? If you got in a crash, do you want them to be safe? Like, this is nonsense. This is leading. Of course they want to be safe, but don't ask them this. This is annoying. And so what I tend to ask, what I want to uncover is what's holding you back. Like, we all know you want to get there. What's holding you back? So I might ask a question to stick with the metaphor of, if you don't get a Volvo, what are you going to buy? Which model? Or have you ever bought a Volvo yet? Why not? I mean, it's a great car, but it's not for everyone. What do you think? How are you going to decide whether it's for you or not? Or why haven't you bought one yet? What's imperfect about it? Now, it sounds like I'm counterselling or I'm planting bad ideas in the client's mind, but I think these ideas are already in their mind. There's a reason they haven't bought yet, and I need to know it. So it's not leading questions, it's authentically curious questions. Where are you at? Where do you want to go? Why haven't you gone there? How can I help? And how can I help better than anyone else? I'll borrow an example from Gail Steinell. She was a super heavy hitter consultant that came to Yale a lot, and now she's an advisor to big companies. She had excuse me, she had a consulting engagement with a large company. I'll make up the numbers, but it was 6 figures. And she said something like, we're doing $300,000 of business each year. You're one of my biggest clients. It's great. I just have a question. I'm not asking for more business, but what would it take in theory for you to do 10 times more business with me? Now, look, you shouldn't use me as your only consultant. You need a wide variety of advice. So I'm not trying to sell you $3 million of the business, but what would it take in theory to get us there? Why aren't we there? So she wasn't trying to sell or persuade. She was trying to uncover obstacles, learn the lay of the land. I always say, before you ask for anything, figure out how they feel about it and what's holding them back. So those are the kind of questions that I typically ask. Why don't you like what I'm selling? Tell me.
Fantastic. And then, what is your favorite question and why?
Well, you say why, that's top 3 or 2 for me. I often say rhymes with pie, starts with a W. Why? But actually, I'm a little bit weird with my questions, so I'll just tell you my little idiosyncratic favorite. It's like, what are you going to do without me? So you're going to buy a Volvo? Before I try to sell you a Volvo, if I can't get you into a Volvo today, what are you going to drive off with? Same old car, a different new car? Audi? Which model? You want to come to Yale? Before I sell you Yale, if you don't go to Yale, where are you going to go? Harvard? Dalhousie? And so your answers to what are you going to do without me tell me a lot about the value proposition I provide, right? The pie, Barry Nailbuff is famous for writing books, and he's a colleague of mine at Yale, really defining the pie is the value we create together compared to what we could do without each other. In other words, it's the value of the deal. What can we do apart that we can't do together? And I think a lot of good salespeople are already good at what can we do together? How do I provide value? But they leave out, like, well, what are my competitors providing? Because if you say you're doing business with me because of knowledge and expertise, yeah, but you can get knowledge and expertise from other professors. So what's unique about my value proposition? You got to know what you can do together, but ask questions about what they will do without you. And some people don't like this idea. They think, like, I'm selling Audis now. Like, why are you talking about Audis and you're downplaying Volvo? You're putting bad ideas into their head. And I just think that's really naive. I think these ideas are already in their head. They're literally thinking about doing business with you, and what's holding them back is your competition or their status quo, and you need to learn more about that. You're not putting ideas in their head. Those ideas are already there. You need to get them in your head. You're not asking them questions so that they hear themselves talking. You're asking them questions so that you hear them.
Fantastic. Dan, do you have a question for me?
Yeah, so you asked when you sent a few questions, I thought that you were better at answering this than me, so I'm going to throw it at you. How do you increase the chance to get replies either in your sales campaigns, your emailing, or maybe you've already got the person at the table and they're just not opening up and you just want to get the conversation. You just need them to answer, say something. Give us some tips there.
Well, I would say I will start with building a trustworthy relationship, right? People are more likely to open up when they trust the other party. And now, of course, trust is something that you build over time. So let's not imagine that you're going to build trust just in 2 seconds. But already, if you're meeting somebody for the first time, already making a good first impression, try to build a rapport is a good starting point before the trust comes your way. I would say that something that also helps is formulate the question in a neutral way, right? If you ask a leading question, if you ask question, what's wrong with the project? Why you're running late? If I talk about a business environment, a boss asking question to a direct report, right? If you ask the question in a certain way, already you build defensiveness in the other party. So I would say trying to formulate the question in a neutral way is something that I value. Another thing that I will say is provide an explanation and a motivation that may encourage the other person to reply. Let me throw an example, right? I was negotiating with a German raw material supplier. I was in charge at the time of raw material packaging and contract manufacturing for my company. And this supplier tells me, Giuseppe, we have the best R&D pipeline in industry. Okay, well, great. That's good news, Jürgen. We are an innovator and we like to work with innovator. Now, for me to be able to explain this back to my technical colleagues, can you please give me some more insight about what is behind the statement that you have the best R&D pipeline in industry? So that somehow, I give an explanation and a motivation for them to tell me more. And by the way, if the question you're asking is a difficult one, maybe you can warn them up front. You can say, I know this is a sensitive question. Will you be able to tell me some more about this? At the end of the day, probably I will say that if the other people feel that you understand and that you care, then they're probably more likely to want to reply this in those kind of contexts. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like your neutral thing. It's a good counterpoint. Maybe not, what do you hate about Volvo, but how are you thinking about this decision? What are the pros and cons when you're buying a car? How are you going to decide? What are the variables that are important to you? Or a little more neutral. I like pushing them with some questions like, what do you hate about what I'm selling? What do you love about them? But you're right, those can be you need a certain level of rapport or else they will get defensive. And I like your example of making it neutral, at least having those neutral questions ready. By the way, hi, Regina Roos. We know her. So nice to see. Anyway.
Fantastic. Perfect. So I will say thank you, Daylian, for this session. Thank you to our audience for being with us and the one that watch the recording until the very end. And remember, if you want to learn some more from Professor Cain, Then we have a session, high performance negotiation and influencing, and it's a whole program with 10 leading experts in the world. And Daylian will be running the session on the 15th of September. And every month we have another expert coming up. For instance, in June, we have Professor Gino from Harvard that talks about the psychology of influence. So look forward to reconnect with you. And our next LinkedIn Live is going to be, maybe stretching my memory, yes, the 23rd of June. The 21st of June at 1 o'clock CET. So that will be the next opportunity to continue the learning journey with us. Thank you very much to Daylian and to our audience, and look forward to reconnect soon. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'm seeing comments. I'm saying hi. Hey, Regina. Hi, James. Hey, everybody. Paris. Lots of people. Milan, Switzerland, Tunisia. Lots of people. Rome. Wow. Hey, everyone. Find me on LinkedIn. There's not too many Daylians out there. Daylian. I'll see you, folks. Thanks.
Fantastic. Giuseppe. Don't miss this opportunity to connect with Daylian. And all the very best to everybody. Thank you.
Cheers.